Today we uncover the shocking truth about UK baked beans. Britain eats more baked beans than every other country on the planet combined. Not more than America, not more than Germany. More than all of them put together. We beat the lot of them combined, and it isn't even close. But here's a question. The last time you opened a tin of beans, did you notice something was a bit different? Less beans than you remember. More of that thin, watery sauce sloshing around. You might have found yourself tipping a bit of it down the sink before you even started cooking, just to get the ratio back to something that looks like beans on toast rather than toast in a puddle. And no, it's not normal to drain your baked beans like it's a tin of tuna. If that's happened to you, you're not imagining it, and you're definitely not alone. We're talking about the bean to sauce ratio. Because here's the thing, the number of tins being sold hasn't dropped. People are still buying baked beans at exactly the rate they always have, possibly more, but the actual number of beans going into each one of those tins appears to be quietly shrinking. £1.40 for a can of juice with the odd bean floating around. They're expecting us to switch to eating beans on toast from a cereal bowl. It's supposed to be baked beans, not a tin of juice with some beans in it. If that's not shrinkflation, I don't know what is. And once you start looking into how that happens and why, it opens up a much bigger picture. And the biggest name in the entire category had a concerning chemical flagged in its can linings by investigators for almost 2 decades. And when they finally did something about it, they announced it in a tweet. One brand that markets itself on community values lists water as an ingredient on the tin before any beans or tomato gets a mention at all. A major supermarket's range doesn't just contain added sugar, it contains a combination of sugar and a second industrial sweetener stacked on top of that, one most people wouldn't recognize if they read it on the label. Clearly compensating for lack of any real ingredients with real taste. So we've gone through the major brands currently sold in UK supermarkets, and we're going to expose the 10 baked bean products you need to avoid. Then we'll reveal the handful, the ones which are actually still worth buying. Now, if any of this sounds familiar, if you've noticed your beans on toast getting soggier and your tin emptier than it used to be, hit that hype button right now. Every single hype helps push this out to more people, and the more people who start paying attention to what's actually going into these tins, the harder it gets for these companies to keep doing this quietly. They've got the advertising budgets, the shelf space, and the packaging working in their favor. What they don't have is control over what happens once enough people start asking questions. So hit the hype button, subscribe because there's plenty more of this coming, and let's get into it. Number 10. Heinz beans. This is probably the tin sitting in more British kitchen cupboards than any other single food product. Beans means Heinz. That slogan's been running since 1967, and it works so well that for a lot of people, questioning it feels slightly uncomfortable, like questioning a childhood memory. That emotional attachment is enormously valuable to a very large American corporation, and they know exactly what it's worth. Let's start with the can itself. In 2001, the UK's Food Standards Agency investigated canned food products and found bisphenol A, a chemical compound that attracted significant concern among researchers studying hormonal effects. In a number of major brands, including Heinz, a further investigation by the independent newspaper in 2010 confirmed it was still present in the linings of 18 out of 20 best-selling UK tinned foods, with Heinz baked beans among them. Heinz's official response at the time was that they remained committed to moving to alternatives. That was 2010. The announcement that their most popular varieties had finally switched came 9 years later, in 2019, through a tweet. Not a press release, not updated packaging, not a letter to customers who'd been buying their product for decades. A tweet. Now look at what's in the tin. Beans at 50 to 51%, tomatoes at 34 to 36%, then water, sugar, corn flour, modified corn flour, salt, spirit vinegar, spice extracts and herb extract. The front of the tin says high fiber, high protein, low fat, gluten-free, one of your 5 a day. All of that is technically accurate. What it doesn't say is that you're paying around £1.40 for a tin where roughly half the contents are beans and the rest is a manufactured sauce held together with industrial thickeners. Long-time buyers have noted for years that there seem to be fewer beans per tin than there used to be, that the sauce has progressively thinned out. And a growing number of people report a faint metallic quality to the flavor that wasn't there in earlier decades. Here's the figure that probably stings most. In January 2026, Which? Magazine ran a blind taste test with 60 independent tasters across 12 different baked bean brands. Heinz scored 76% and was awarded a Which? Best Buy, Aldi's own brand, scored 77%, also a Best Buy at around 40 pence a tin. 1 percentage point separates them in taste, about £1 separates them at the checkout. That's the branded bean tax laid bare. And in 2024, Heinz quietly discontinued their entire organic range, citing changing culinary trends. The standard formula, though, very much remains, and it's getting incrementally less generous with every passing year. Number 9. Tesco Baked Beans. Tesco is the UK's biggest supermarket, and their own brand beans appear on a lot of shopping lists as the sensible, affordable step down from the branded tins. The formula follows the now familiar pattern: haricot beans at 49%, then water, then tomato puree at 20%, sugar, modified maize starch, salt, and onion powder. But there's something specific on this label worth noting. Paprika extract appears twice. It's declared once as a flavor ingredient, and then separately again as a color. If paprika extract is already in the product as a spice, why does it need a second declaration as a coloring agent? The straightforward interpretation is that it's being used in large enough quantities to function as a coloring, giving the sauce a richer, deeper tone than the actual tomato content would produce on its own. It's not illegal, it's not hidden, it's right there on the label, but it's a technique that tells you something about the gap between how the product looks and what's driving that appearance. There's also a wider context worth knowing about. In November 2023, the Food Standards Agency issued a recall notice covering baked bean products from Tesco, Asda, Sainsbury's, and Morrison's within the same short window. All traced back to the same type of manufacturing issue involving foreign material in the cans. 4 different supermarket own brand products, 4 different labels, 1 shared origin point. When a production fault affects multiple separate retailers simultaneously like that, it tells you something about how much of what sits on those different shelves under different names actually comes from the same industrial source. It's not a secret, it just doesn't tend to feature in the branding. Number 8. Heinz No Added Sugar Beans. This one is aimed directly at health-conscious shoppers. The front of the tin leads with no added sugar in large, reassuring print, and for anyone keeping an eye on sugar intake, that's a genuinely appealing message. The sugar content is lower than the standard tin, and that's real. But let's look at what Heinz actually did here. They removed the sugar and replaced it with staviol glycosides, a sweetener derived from the stevia plant. Stevia is plant-derived, not synthetic. But it's still a sweetener, still added to the formula to replicate the function that regular sugar was providing. And the modified corn flour that acts as the industrial thickener in the standard version, still there. The ingredient list reads: beans, tomatoes, water, modified corn flour, spirit vinegar, salt, natural flavoring, spice extracts, a stevia-based sweetener, and herb extract. People who've tried this tin often describe the flavor as quite different from the original, and not always in a way they'd choose again. The stevia sweetness doesn't sit against the acidity of the tomato the same way regular sugar does, and it can leave a noticeably different aftertaste. So what Heinz have done is take one ingredient out, swap a different one in, and rebuilt the entire marketing story around that single change. The no added sugar label implies a cleaner, simpler, healthier product. What it actually means is the same industrial formula with one substitution. If that substitution genuinely matters to you for specific dietary reasons, it's available and it does deliver lower sugar. Just understand exactly what you're choosing. Number 7. Asda Baked Beans. Asda's standard beans have been described in independent taste reviews as noticeably sweeter than most of the competition. That observation matches what the label reflects, with tomato at 36% and beans at 49%. There's a meaningful amount of sauce to produce, and when the real tomato flavor can only do so much, sugar becomes the most cost-effective way to make the sauce taste like something. The result is a product that sits closer to a mild sweet tomato soup than to a traditional savory bean sauce. A lot of people don't mind that at all, and some genuinely prefer it. But it's worth being clear about what's generating that flavor, because it isn't the tomato. The rest of the ingredient list is the standard modern formula: modified maize starch, salt, paprika onion powder, paprika extract, and then just flavorings. Not natural flavorings, not a named spice blend. Just the single word flavorings, which is one of the more opaque declarations you'll regularly see on a baked bean label. It covers an unspecified range of compounds without identifying any of them. For a product that should theoretically be beans, tomatoes, salt, and a small amount of sugar, there's no real reason for that level of vagueness. The simpler the actual recipe, the more transparent the label tends to be. This one isn't. Number 6. Heinz beans with pork sausages. This one takes an already processed product and layers another processed product on top of it, and then wraps the whole thing in the language of comfort and nostalgia. Quick, easy. Filling counts as one of your 5 a day. Sounds straightforward enough until you start reading carefully. The sausages in this tin make up 15% of the contents. The pork inside those sausages is 55%, meaning just over half of the sausage component is actual meat, with the rest being water, rice flour, pea starch. Pork fat, vegetable fiber, salt, spices, and an emulsifier listed as triphosphates. That emulsifier is a standard additive in processed meat products used to bind water and fat together and improve the texture. Salt then appears independently in the sauce as well, separate from the salt already declared within the sausage sub-recipe. So you've got sodium coming from 2 different directions in the same tin, and neither the front of the pack nor the product name draws attention to that. The beans were already bringing sugar and a manufactured sauce. The sausages arrived with their own set of additives. The comfort food framing on the front does a lot of work to make all of that feel simple and familiar. Number 5. Morrison's baked beans. Morrison's standard beans are a very useful example of the gap between what the front of a tin communicates and what the back of it is doing. The front of the pack carries 5 separate claims. 1 of your 5 a day, low fat, source of fiber, no artificial colors or flavors suitable for vegans. That's 5 pieces of positioning on the front of a standard own-brand tin of beans. Every one of them is technically accurate. Not one of them tells you anything meaningful about how the sauce was made. Turn it over. Haricot beans at 49%. Then reconstituted tomato puree at 34%. That word reconstituted means the tomato was concentrated or dried down during processing and then had water added back in to bring it to a usable liquid form for the production line. Then comes water again, sugar, modified maize starch, salt, onion powder, ground paprika, rapeseed oil, clove extract, cinnamon extract, paprika extract, flavoring, and garlic extract. That's 12 separate ingredients after the beans and the rehydrated tomato. The front of the pack was doing the selling. The back was doing the confessing. Morrison's leans harder into front-of-pack health language than most of the tins on this list, and the distance between those 5 claims on the front and the actual ingredient list on the back is worth sitting with for a moment. Number 4. Co-op baked beans. The Co-op has a genuinely stronger ethical identity than almost any other UK supermarket. It's member-owned, community-rooted, and has spent decades building a reputation around doing things differently to the corporate mainstream. When people choose Co-op products, there's often a real sense of alignment in that choice, a feeling that the values on the outside of the packaging extend to what's inside it. So here's the ingredient list for their baked beans. Haricot beans at 52%, water reconstituted tomato puree at 20%, sugar, modified maize starch, salt, onion powder, paprika flavorings. The thing to notice is the order. After the beans, the second ingredient listed is water. The tomato comes third. In UK food labelling, ingredients are listed in descending order of weight, which means there is more water in this tin than there is tomato content. The sauce is being constructed. Tomato concentrate rehydrated with water, then sweetened, then thickened with modified starch, then finished with something called flavorings, but the label doesn't specify further. Take the beans out of this tin, and what remains is water, processed tomato, sugar, starch, and an unnamed flavoring. The ethical values are real, the community focus is real, but the sauce follows exactly the same industrial formula as everyone else on this list. Number 3. Stamford Street Co. Baked beans. This is Sainsbury's budget range, and it earns its place at number 3 for one very specific reason. Take a close look at the ingredient list. Haricot beans at 45%, tomatoes at 32%, water, sugar, modified maize starch, and then glucose-fructose syrup. 2 distinct sweeteners in one tin. Regular table sugar, and then on top of that, glucose-fructose syrup. Glucose-fructose syrup is an industrial sweetener produced by processing cornstarch down to a liquid sweetener form. It's cheaper than refined sugar, it integrates easily into high-volume production lines, and it doesn't have a name that flags itself when most people skim an ingredient list. The vast majority of shoppers reading this label wouldn't know what it is or why it's there. It's there because when you're driving the price point down as aggressively as possible, every single input is under cost scrutiny. And glucose-fructose syrup lets you hit the required sweetness profile in the sauce at a lower cost than sugar alone. The bean content at 45% is also below most of the other tins in this video, the majority of which sit between 49 and 52%. So what you have is a lower bean ratio, a processed tomato base, an industrial thickener, and then 2 sweeteners operating in tandem. Budget tins exist because people are working with genuine cost pressures, and there's no judgment in reaching for the cheapest option. But when every cost is being cut simultaneously, it's worth understanding exactly what those cuts look like. Number 2. Waitrose Essential Baked Beans. Waitrose carries a reputation that attaches itself to everything on the shelf with the Waitrose name on it, including the Essential range. The expectation tends to be that even at their basic level, standards hold. And in most respects, Waitrose Essential beans follow a fairly standard own-brand pattern. What distinguishes this tin is one specific ingredient that no other brand in this video carries. The full ingredient list runs to haricot beans at 52%, water, tomato puree at 20%, sugar, modified maize starch, salt, natural flavoring, onion powder, ground paprika extract, paprika oil, rapeseed oil, clove extract, cinnamon extract, chili extract, garlic extract, and then an anti-caking agent listed as silicon dioxide. We went through every verified brand in this video, and Waitrose Essential is the only one with silicon dioxide on the label. Anti-caking agents are used in powdered and granular foods to stop ingredients clumping and keep them flowing freely. They're found in table salt, in powdered soups, in spice mixes and dried seasoning blends. In a tin of beans sitting in a liquid sauce, where there's no powder that needs to remain free-flowing, it's an unusual ingredient to encounter. It doesn't make the product harmful, but it raises a genuine question about what exactly it's doing in a tin that's supposed to be an essential kitchen staple, and it's the kind of thing that the premium positioning of the Waitrose name tends to deflect attention away from. Number 1. Ocado Baked Beans. Ocado is the modern, digitally native online grocery brand. It feels clean and contemporary in a way that older, established supermarket names don't, and that feeling of modernity gets attached to their own brand products. The website describes their baked beans as being served in a rich, slightly sweet tomato sauce. That sounds appealing, so let's look at what's actually producing that richness. Haricot beans at 50%, then water, then tomato puree at 18%. That's lower than every other mainstream brand verified in this video. Most sit between 19 and 21%. A lower tomato percentage means less natural tomato flavor in the sauce, which means other ingredients have to carry more of the load. After the tomato comes sugar, modified maize starch, salt, onion powder, paprika, and then maltodextrin. Maltodextrin is a highly refined starch used in processed food production as a filler, a carrier for flavor compounds, and a texture modifier. Most of the other brands on this list don't include it. Then come paprika extract, clove extract, capsicum extract, and a general flavoring declaration that names nothing further. So when Ocado's product description promises a rich, slightly sweet tomato sauce, that richness is being produced with the lowest verified tomato percentage in the category, extended with 2 separate industrial starches, and completed with multiple extracts and an unspecified flavoring compound. The branding communicates clean and trustworthy. The ingredient list tells a noticeably different story. In a video full of tins where the front and back of the pack are doing different jobs, this one makes that gap most visible, which is why it sits at number 1. Now, before we get to the tins worth buying, two brands don't quite fit cleanly into either the avoid or the better picks category, and they're worth addressing honestly. Branston. Branston launched in 2005 with one straightforward proposition: thicker, richer, more tomato than Heinz. Within a few months, it had captured nearly 10% of the UK baked beans market, which forced Heinz to quietly tweak their own formula in response. That's a remarkable achievement, and the loyalty Branston has built since then is real and earned on taste. A lot of people genuinely prefer it, and they're not wrong to. But there's a gap between the positioning and the label that's worth being honest about. The thickness that defines the Branston experience comes from modified maize starch, the same industrial thickener used by most of the brands on the avoid list. The sugar per 100 grams sits at around 4.7 grams, slightly above Heinz at 4.3. The step up from Heinz positioning is a taste story, and people who prefer the taste aren't imagining it. But it isn't an ingredient story. Those two things are different, and if you love Branston, you deserve to know which one you're responding to. Aldi Bramwells and Little Newgate in January 2026. Which magazine ran a blind taste test with 60 independent tasters covering 12 baked bean products. Aldi Bramwells and Little Newgate came joint first, both scoring 77%. Heinz scored 76%. Both discount brands were awarded which best buys and cost around 40 pence a tin, compared to Heinz at around £1.40. The branded bean tax is absolutely real, and that test proved it more clearly than anything else could. However, a good taste test result tells you about flavour, not formulation. Both Aldi and Lidl still follow the same blueprint as the tins on the avoid list: modified maize starch, sugar, salt, and a range of extracts and flavourings. They represent outstanding value. They don't represent a cleaner product. Knowing the difference between those two things is exactly what this video is for. So, what does a genuinely better tin actually look like? The short answer is a shorter ingredient list, a thickener that isn't chemically modified, and no industrial sweeteners layered on top of regular sugar. They do exist. They're not hard to find, and some of them cost barely more than the brands that have been trading on their name for decades. First, M&S baked beans. Marks & Spencer's standard baked beans aren't marketed as organic or as a health product. They're just regular baked beans, but the ingredient list is noticeably shorter and more transparent than most of what we've covered today. Haricot beans at 49%, tomatoes at 33%, water, sugar corn flour, salt vinegar, dried onions, paprika extract, paprika onion oil, chili pepper extract, and garlic extract. The key distinction is the thickener. M&S uses plain corn flour, not modified maize starch. Corn flour is corn ground into flour, nothing more. No industrial chemical modification, no processing beyond the milling. The product still has added sugar, still uses extracts, still has a commercial formulation. But it's a meaningfully cleaner label than what you'll find in the standard supermarket own brand range, and it's available in M&S stores nationwide without needing to seek out a specialist retailer. Second, Tesco organic baked beans. It might feel contradictory to have Tesco's standard beans on the avoid list and their organic range here, but the gap between the two products is significant. The organic version contains 53% haricot beans, higher than the 49% in the standard range. The tomato puree sits at 21%. The thickener is organic maize starch, which is plain cornstarch in its natural form, not the chemically processed modified version used in mass market production. The full list is organic haricot beans, organic tomato puree, water, organic sugar, organic maize starch, salt, organic onion powder, organic rice flour, citric acid, organic paprika, organic chili powder, and certified organic throughout, available in Tesco stores and currently around £1 a tin. For anyone who wants organic certification and a cleaner label without hunting down a specialist shop, this is probably the most practical option on the list. Third, Waitrose Duchy Organic Baked Beans. Waitrose's essential range appeared on the avoid list. Their Dutchie Organic line is a completely different product. The Dutchie brand was founded through Prince Charles's organic farming commitments and is now linked to the Prince's charities, with a portion of every purchase going toward charitable causes. The baked beans are certified organic throughout, and the ingredient list reflects it: organic haricot beans, water, organic tomato puree, organic sugar, maize starch, sea salt, organic onion powder, organic chili powder, organic black pepper, organic garlic powder, organic nutmeg, and turmeric. No silicon dioxide, no glucose-fructose syrup, no vague flavorings declaration. The spice profile is also noticeably more considered than the standard tins, giving the sauce a genuine depth that most of the mass-market products simply don't have. It's at the higher price end of the better picks, but for Waitrose shoppers, it's a substantially better choice than anything in the essential range. Fourth, and the one with the cleanest label of everything reviewed today, Biona Organic Baked Beans. Biona has been producing certified organic food for decades, and their baked beans do something almost no other mainstream product currently manages. They don't use modified starch of any kind. The thickener is brown rice flour, which is exactly what it sounds like: rice that's been milled to a flour. That's it. The complete ingredient list is organic haricot beans at 49%, water, organic tomato puree at 21%, organic sugar, brown rice flour, sea salt, and a certified organic bean seasoning that contains onion powder, cassia, nutmeg, cloves, garlic powder, dill, sunflower oil, and capsicum extract. The sugar content comes in at 4 grams per 100 grams, which is at the lower end of any standard baked bean product on the market. The can carries a no BPA label. Everything is certified organic. It's available through Ocado, independent health food shops, and various online retailers. It's not the cheapest tin on the shelf, but it's the closest thing available to what baked beans looked like before the industrial formula became the unchallenged default. If you want one tin that represents the full opposite of everything on the avoid list, this is it. That's the full picture on UK baked beans. 2 million tins a day in this country, most of them built on the same foundation of modified starch, reconstituted tomato, layered sugar, and whatever the label calls flavorings. The better options are out there, they're accessible, and they don't all require spending dramatically more. You just need to know which side of the tin to read. If this video changed how you look at those cans in the supermarket aisle, hit the hype button and share it, because someone in your life is opening one of these tins right now without a clue what's in it. And this information is exactly what they need. Leave a comment telling us which food or drink we should investigate next, because we genuinely read every one and they shape what we cover. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because there's a long list of products still to go through. Until next time, read the label, question what you're buying, and protect your plate.